Hi there, this video is to work building block number 8, which is about slip stitches. So with the last block, the mock cable, we slipped stitches purlwise with yarn held in back, which is how you're always meant to work them unless it's otherwise indicated in your pattern. This block is an example of a pattern where you're going to be directed to slip stitches with yarn in front. That's this WYIF acronym that you're going to see in the instructions. That means with yarn in front. So when slipping those stitches, you're going to bring your working yarn up to the front of your work before you slip. And then you're going to bring it back to the back of your work. And in so doing, you are going to create these bands of yarn across the front of your work, and it will create this zigzag pattern that we're going to see emerge in the block. The way that's accomplished is that on each of the right side rows, you work a different number of stitches before setting up the repeat of slipping 2 stitches with yarn in front, knit 4, and then ending with a corresponding different number of stitches before knitting your border once again. So as with so many of the previous blocks, there is a setup row that is worked once. This setup row just increases 2 stitches in the number of body stitches, working a knit front and back, knitting all the way across until you get to the last stitch before your border stitches, knitting front and back again, and then knitting your border. So I'll demonstrate that really quickly, just once here. So once again, we're going to work our seed stitch over those first 4 border stitches. Then do a knit front and back increase, which means I'm going to go in the front of my stitch, wrap the yarn, pull through, don't pull the stitch off of your left hand needle. Instead, insert your right hand needle back into the back of the stitch, wrap again, pull through, and you've created 2 stitches from where there was a single stitch before. Knit all the way across until you're 5 stitches total from the end. Knit front and back into this stitch again, and knit your 4 border stitches. That will give you a total of 50 stitches for your full block, or 42 stitches, body stitches inside of your border. All right. Now I have worked, after the setup row, you'll go immediately to row 2, which is just to purl all the way across. Every even numbered row in this block is just going to be purling across the back. So I went ahead and worked row 2 already. I worked the setup row, I worked row 2, then I worked row 3. So I have this first set of slipped bands that I wanted to show on the video. I worked row 4, purling back across, and I'm now set up to work row 5. So with row 3, I would knit 1 before proceeding to the slip 2 with yarn in front, knit 4. For row 5, I will knit 2 before doing slip 2 with yarn in front, knit 4. And that will offset that slipped band by 1 more stitch, and I'll do that each time. There will be different numbers of stitches to offset that little slipped band, and that's what's going to create that zigzag that goes up the block. All right, so let's start row 5 here, and I'll demonstrate how we go about slipping those stitches. First 4 seed stitch border stitches. Knit 2. Now slip 2 with yarn in front. So I bring my working yarn up to the front of my work, and I'm going to slip 2 stitches, slipping as if to purl, and then I'm going to bring my yarn across those 2 stitches and back to the back of my work before knitting the following 4 stitches. And then I'm just going to repeat that all the way across. You can see how in row 3 the slipped band is back here, and now in row 5 it's a little bit further forward, and that's going to kind of progress back and forth throughout the block. When you slip stitches, you're going to want to make sure that you have them you don't want a lot of loose, slack yarn across the front of your work, but you also don't want to pull so tightly that you're cinching all of your stitches in. So you just want to sort of give it, you don't pull on your yarn, but have it somewhat firm in hand when you knit that first stitch after. This is also a method used for mosaic color work and some other techniques, so slip stitches can be very useful in a number of different patterns. Oops, I didn't slip, or I didn't knit 4 during that last repeat, so I'm just going to back it up. Oh, never mind, I did. And as you can see, I'm just sort of coming across the work with my working yarn, not pulling tightly, just kind of letting it lay across those stitches before I knit the following stitches. Okay? And that's really all there is to slipping stitches. You're just literally doing what the pattern says, that you're slipping 2 with yarn in front and then knitting 4. And all you're really going to pay attention to are the setup instructions before starting that slip 2 with yarn in front, knit 4. So I'm going to go ahead, we work the 16 row pattern 4 times. On the last repeat, you'll end after row 15, a right side row. You won't purl across the back side row. Instead, we're going to move to a decrease row where we get rid of those 2 stitches that were increased during the setup row. All right, so when I turn the camera on again, we'll be ready to work the decrease row. And I think this block should go quite quickly for everybody, because slip stitches are very fun to work and you kind of fall into a rhythm. And as long as you keep track of what row you're on, keep careful count with your row counter or a post-it that you're moving through your pattern or something like that, then this should go pretty smoothly. All right. Okay, so here I am back, having worked that 16 row repeat 4 times. I'm ready to knit my final row 15 before then doing the decrease row and then the final border. So I thought I'd just go ahead and do that on camera just to review the slip stitch technique once more. And then the block will be finished. Hopefully you can see that zigzag pattern that has emerged from the slip stitches, and it looks pretty cool. Just a tone-on-tone textured pattern. So let's go ahead and work row 15, which, as the pattern says, is same as row 3. That means we'll knit 1 after our border stitches before we start the slip 2 with yarn in front, knit 4. So once again, our 4 border stitches. Come on. And then knit 1 before starting our slip 2, knit 4. Again, I'm just slipping those stitches with my yarn held in front, bringing it across and to the back without pulling tight. I don't want it really loose, but I also don't want to, strangle those stitches. So just a nice even tension before I then knit 4. Again, bring that yarn to the front, slip 2, and I know that my pattern is coming out correctly because I'm offset by 1 stitch from the slipped bar below. Worked as row 13 previously. And just continuing all the way across until that final repeat when I'm only going to have knit 3 instead of knit 4. So there's my final slip and the yarn across, and then 1, 2, 3 before my 4 border stitches. Alright, now comes the decrease row, just before our final 5 rows of seed stitch and bind off. Alright, so just to review once more, we're going to do our 4 border stitches as normal. And then we are going to purl 2 together to take away a stitch that we added during our setup row. So again, here's our 2 stitches. I'm going to insert my needle tip through both of them as if to purl, wrap my yarn, pull it through, 1 stitch from where there were 2 before. Purl 2 together. And then I will just purl all the way across until I have only 6 stitches left on my needle, my 4 border stitches, and 2 more body stitches that I will then purl 2 together again to reduce by 1 more stitch, taking me back down to a total of 48 stitches. Then 5 rows of seed stitch border and the bind off in pattern. Alright, I'll show the finished block in just a moment. So here is the completed block. It's been washed and blocked and pinned out to 12 inches square. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see that slip stitch texture that sort of takes on that zigzag pattern. And that's it. Hopefully this was a pretty easy block for all of you, and you had fun with it. Thanks again.